Well, you were American citizens, so you thought you were safe, right? Wrong. Welcome back to Buffys World in our video series, Illuminating the Shadows of American History, which is your go-to place for revealing those lost, forgotten, or overshadowed moments in America's past. Today's episode is no exception. It's the Olvera Street Raid of 1931. The name might be unfamiliar, but its impact resonates even today. Now, before we begin, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to support our channel in shedding light on these underrepresented historical events. So let's turn back the clock and explore this poignant story. It's 1931 in Los Angeles, California. America is deep in the throes of the Great Depression, and the pressure is building across the country. It's an era of fear and uncertainty, fueled by economic instability, nationwide job shortages, and social unrest. This period in American history was marked by significant economic and social turbulence. The United States, like the rest of the world, was in the grips of the Great Depression, which began with the stock market crash in October 1929. By 1931, the devastating effects of this severe economic downturn had permeated nearly every corner of American society. Economically, the unemployment rate has skyrocketed, reaching approximately 16% by 1931. Factories shuttered their doors, businesses went bankrupt, and banks failed. Many families lost their life savings as a result. Furthermore, the agricultural sector was also hit hard, with many farmers unable to sell their products or pay their loans, leading to widespread foreclosure and dislocation. Socially, the strains were visible and palpable. Poverty levels were extremely high, with many Americans lacking access to food and shelter. Homelessness increased dramatically, as did malnutrition and associated health problems. In addition to the domestic economic and social issues, there were international pressures as well. The U.S. was still recovering from the effects of World War I, which ended in 1918, and the world was beginning to see the early rumblings of the geopolitical tensions that would eventually explode into World War II. These societal pressures led to a rise in xenophobia and nativism. Immigrants, particularly from Mexico, were frequently scapegoated for the economic problems. The government conducted mass deportations, euphemistically referred to as repatriations, in an attempt to free up jobs for quote-unquote real Americans. This was the pressure cooker environment that existed in 1931, a year when the economic hardship was at its peak and social and racial tensions were sharply escalating, thus setting the stage for incidents like the Olvera Street Raid in Los Angeles. So in response to these pressures, the U.S. authorities began to target Mexican immigrants in a series of immigration raids, citing job scarcity and economic strain. One of the most infamous of these took place at the plaza at Olvera Street in Los Angeles, California, a historic district known as the birthplace of the city and a thriving Mexican-American community. In fact, Olvera Street was the heart of Los Angeles' Mexican community and an iconic symbol of the city's Mexican heritage, but even it was not spared. 4 days before the event, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, or INS, had posted newspaper ads warning of an impending raid against, quote, Mexican aliens, unquote, in Los Angeles. Some took the government seriously and left the country, but the majority of the region's then roughly 175,000 Mexican Americans continued making lives for themselves in Los Angeles. Well, you were American citizens, so you thought you were safe, right? Wrong. On February 26, 1931, families strolled and vendors peddled their wares on Olvera Street. But at around 3 p.m., the word razzia, meaning raid, shattered the afternoon serenity as men and women ran from a detachment of armed Immigration Bureau agents. They stormed Olvera Street. These agents were wielding guns and batons. But this wasn't just an immigration raid. As recounted by Luisa Moreno, a Guatemalan immigrant and labor activist and eyewitness, this was an act of force and intimidation. She described in detail how the agents, quote, guns drawn, stormed in without warning, blocking all exits, rounding up anyone in their path, unquote, and they demanded identification from everyone present, man, woman, and child. The consequences for those who couldn't produce satisfactory ID were immediate and devastating. Families were ripped apart as over 400 individuals were detained. Moreno's haunting description of the aftermath paints a heartbreaking scene. Quote, children left crying in the street, their parents whisked away. It was a spectacle of pure terror, unquote. Miss Moreno's descriptions were taken from her interview conducted by Ernesto Galarza in 1971. Francisco Valderrama and Raymond Rodriguez documented the event in their book entitled Decade of Betrayal, Mexican Repatriation in the 1930s. Valderrama recalled, quote, we interviewed people who remembered coming home from school and finding the house empty. Some never saw their parents again, unquote. The majority of the 400 detainees were subsequently deported to Mexico, their pleas falling on deaf ears. But this was just one act within a broader policy during the 1930s, the mass deportation of Mexicans and Mexican Americans, euphemistically termed repatriation. Some scholars estimate that up to 1 million people were forcibly removed in the 1930s, and that around 60% of whom were actually American citizens. Moreover, many of the people banished were sent to a Mexican homeland they had never seen before. Some barely spoke Spanish. And here's the kick in the ass on all of this. Relatively few of those 1 million were expelled under formal INS directed removal proceedings. Was the government trying to hide something? You know, no records, no proof, no bad doing by the government. Same old bullshit. Little to no slave records, little to no INS records. And don't forget that all these repatriations were driven by the economic hardship of the Great Depression and xenophobic sentiment. That's just another way of saying racist attitude at that time. Hello, Florida 2023. Sound familiar, DeSantis? No migrant farm workers or construction workers are basically holding Florida hostage right now due to the same mentality. The only difference is that this time, the Latinos chose to leave. They were not forcibly removed this time. So how did this event change the lives of those involved, and what ripple effects did it have on their communities? Well, this incident left indelible scars on the Mexican American community, both psychologically and societally. One participant, Juan Romero, was a 9-year-old boy when the raid happened, and he witnessed his father being taken away. Suddenly orphaned, Juan and his siblings ended up in foster care. Years later, Romero would channel this traumatic experience into activism, joining Cesar Chavez's United Farm Workers movement and devoting his life to advocating for immigrant rights. This recounting was taken from Romero's personal interview in 1985. Raymond Rodriguez has also written about his father's experience during this period in America in the 1930s. Raymond's father, Juan Rodriguez, was a legal resident and has spent years happily tending his family's livestock and produce farm in Long Beach. But like thousands of others in Los Angeles during that time, one day in 1935, Juan Rodriguez abruptly abandoned his family. His wife Juanita, 10-year-old son Raymond, and 4 other children never heard from him again. Raymond Rodriguez can still recount his father's parting moments as if they happened a few moments ago instead of in 1935. His father told his wife and Raymond's mother, quote, if you don't go too, you'll starve to death and maybe worse, end quote. And he said this right before the door slammed as he left. But his wife Juanita responded with, quote, no, whatever happens is God's will, unquote. Raymond Rodriguez remembers that after his father left, quote, for a time we were on welfare. It was really tough. My 13-year-old brother and I had to plow the farm ourselves. I really missed having my dad around. He was a great storyteller, end quote. Years later, Raymond Rodriguez speculated that his father left, perhaps thinking that if the American government, quote, don't want me, I'm going back, end quote. Again, much like the response in Florida today. But this is just so sad that this man felt that he had to leave his family because of how the U.S. government had been treating his people. What are your thoughts on this? What would you have done in this situation? Leave a comment and let us know. The Olvera Street Raid is a harsh reminder of yet another dark period in American history. It is a tragically overlooked event that exposes the perils of fear-driven policies and showcases the resilience of those affected. And the Olvera Street Raid reminds us of the power of history, not just to recount the past, but to inform our present and future. And by remembering these events, we ensure that these events do not get lost in the shadows. Furthermore, by reflecting on the past, we can better understand our present and hopefully build a more inclusive and compassionate future. But more importantly, hopefully we can avoid making the same mistakes today or in the future. As always, remember to engage with this video. Your likes, comments, and shares not only help our channel, but also play a crucial role in raising awareness about these underrepresented moments in American history. In the comments, please share with us how this story resonated with you and any other hidden historical events you want us to uncover. Thanks so much for watching, and as we sign off, we urge you to continue exploring these moments with us and to shine a light on the forgotten corners of America's past. So until next time, let's keep illuminating the shadows of American history together. Bye for now.